Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the fifth lecture of public finance. Well, before every lecture, I hope that you guys have developed an interest in the subject, and by now, considering your degree background, you are doing masters in public administration, and the subject of public finance falls in your domain, and all the public policies need to be understood to take up this degree program. Public finance is a very important, very important field, which is because the government policies, government actions, taxes, subsidies, fiscal policies do not only affect the aggregate economy, but also all the individuals and their welfare at individual level, even yourself. So in the last lecture, we were discussing the role of externalities. Externalities are actually the marginal external cost and marginal external benefits, which are not actually accounted for in the marginal social cost and marginal social benefit. Whenever the marginal private cost or marginal private benefit is added with external cost and external benefit, then it would be total marginal social cost and marginal social benefit. Now in this case, specifically, there are effects in the market, and the market is not operating efficiently, considering that the externality is affecting the third party. Third party is the one who is not directly involved in the transaction but is being affected by that transaction. Now in this case, let's assume that it is the environmental pollution, or maybe the effect of vaccination, which would be a positive externality. When there is marginal external cost, that is a negative externality, and a marginal external benefit, there is positive externality. Now negative externality would cause an efficient, not an efficient level of production, and when marginal external cost is added to marginal private cost, that would result in marginal social cost being greater than marginal social benefit. For that, it is required that the output needs to be reduced, which can be done by the government intervention. And since from the start of this course, we have been attempting to justify the role of the government in the economy, which is essential, based on welfare economic principles, and we certainly discussed that the role of government is not only essential, but it has become of more increased importance with the tilt towards not just the police states but also the welfare states. So under the welfare economics, which identifies the Pareto optimality, that welfare of certain individuals or of one individual in particular, if under Pareto optimality, if welfare of one individual is increased, the welfare of other individual must not be decreased. So government intervention is necessary in that case. So a negative externality can be corrected by the government by taking up, for example, a tax, taxing the externality, and then the tax should be equal to the marginal external cost, and when that marginal external cost, or in other words, the tax is added to the marginal private cost, the total marginal private cost would be greater than marginal marginal social cost would be greater than marginal social benefit, and then the output would automatically be reduced at the efficient level. The similar case was with positive externality, in which there are positive effects towards the third party. For example, we followed an example of a vaccination to to the point where we introduced a step by the government to correct that externality. Vaccination is, for example, if one individual is vaccinated, that would actually have a positive externality towards the others, because the third parties would be affected in a positive way, because this individual is not a potential carrier anymore of the disease. And that would actually cause the disease to be contained and curtailed in environment, and maybe later on in life, in longer term, it can be totally eradicated from the globe or the country maybe. Now in this case, this is a positive externality, and as long as this external benefit is not included in the cost of those people who are not using it but are being benefited from it, if that is included, then marginal social benefit would be same as marginal social cost, or marginal private benefit would be same as marginal social cost. But when that externality is accounted for as a marginal external benefit, that would result into marginal private benefit plus marginal economic benefit would be equal to marginal social benefit, and marginal social benefit would be greater than marginal social cost, and the output needs to be improved or increased. Now if output needs to be increased, then in that case government can again intervene in the economy by producing by giving subsidy to either to the producers for reducing the cost of that or price of that product, or to individual consumers. It's subsidized in any manner, and the result would be increase in the total output being produced, and marginal social benefit be equal to marginal social cost. Keep in mind that in this case marginal social benefit is the sum of marginal private benefit plus marginal external benefit. Now with this said and done, actually we were discussing the role of externalities, role of the public policy in terms of the externalities, and specifically, sorry, I just remembered, we discussed another very interesting case in which a monopoly, which we discussed in past few lectures, that monopoly causes an inefficiency in the system because its marginal private cost is less than marginal social benefit. But it still does not produces the quantity that is required because of its monopoly power. So government can regulate to increase its quantity. But then if the monopoly is producing a negative externality in terms maybe of pollution, then there is a need to tax it and reduce the quantity. So if those two effects are balanced out, the result would be that monopoly is actually itself balancing out the negative externality by being a monopoly. Because if we break up that monopoly and we produce a perfectly competitive market environment, then they would produce a higher quantity, but then we would have to tax that higher quantity to reduce the quantity so that it comes back to an optimal level or efficient level. Now this all said and done, we need to see what are the causes of externality. Now externalities are basically might be caused by the debate over property rights of some resource users are not identified. Now for example, the market participants participate in the market based on certain transaction costs. Now these transaction costs might be in terms of traveling costs, negotiation costs, negotiating the contracts and taking risk in the market, and then based on that transaction cost they pay a certain price and either sell or buy the product. Now if that transaction cost is less than the price or the total benefit they are acquiring from that whole activity, if that price is greater, then the producers and sellers would benefit. So when we consider the externalities in terms of the property rights, when certain users are not given property rights of some products are not identified, for example, my right to use of clean drinking water is not identified, then that is the cause of externality, and government can intervene to allocate the property rights. Now if the government can intervene to allocate the property rights, in that case the result would be that the government would be increasing or decreasing the transaction costs, causing efficiency in the system. Now, governments have been changing the property rights and can change the property rights and assign the property rights, but this assignment of property rights is itself a very debatable topic, because government itself can benefit certain individuals by giving them the property rights. Now, we would discuss that later. Now, just consider the example of, for example, pollution in a stream. We discussed the examples of a paper producing industry whose waste goes into a lake or a stream. Now, maybe they buy a right to do that. Then on the other hand, there is, for example, individuals who need to use that clean stream for example, recreation activities. Then they also have the right to use that stream. Now, in this case, the government's assignment of the right defines the whole situation, because if there is a cause theorem which states that if there are no transaction costs involved, the externalities can be corrected by assigning the property rights by the government and letting those two parties negotiate and sort out the externality and the payment that would balance out the marginal social cost and marginal social benefits. Now, in this extreme example, let's assume that the government might give the right of pollution to the producer. If the right of pollution goes to the producer, then the producer would pollute, and in that case, the users of those streams, the recreational users, might need to pay the producer to reduce the pollution. So if that payment is enough for the producer to go to the cost of reducing that pollution, then the producer would do that. On the other hand, let us assume that the government now give the property rights to the users of the stream, or maybe the recreational, or maybe the residents in the area. Then in that case, in order to acquire the rights in order to pollute in the stream, the company or the producers of the paper would need to pay the users of the stream. So in this case, the people would negotiate themselves to balance out the effects, and all the government has to do is to assign the property rights. So Cowles' theorem basically states that if there are no transaction costs, an assignment of property rights to either party would automatically come to an efficient outcome. Now, all those externalities that can be solved by Cowles' theorem are called small number externalities, and one of the important things is that two parties need to be identified, which parties are like emitters and receptors. Let's assume that in first case, we assume that receptors are the individuals in the stream, individuals using the stream, while the industry which is causing pollution is the emitter. In that case, the receptors would be benefited by the emitter. On the other hand, if individuals are treated as emitters and the industry is treated as a receptor, then individuals would need to pay the industry to reduce the pollution. Establishing the rights, the property rights of either the emitters or the receptors, the government can internalize the externality without having to intervene, as long as the most important part is that there are no transaction costs involved. As in our example, if there are no transaction costs involved, when the pollution-free use of pollution-free stream by the users of the stream as against the pollutant, the industry, if the industry can pay them which is in excess of their right to use that stream, then they can pollute that stream without any objections. Now, in case of Cowles' theorem and the property rights, we would go through the basic definition of the theorem. Then there would be an example through which we would discuss the difference between receptors and emitters, and specifically that there is sometimes a difficulty in identifying the two parties, and the significance of Cowles' theorem in the real environment and application of the pollution rights, which would be actually the application of theory to the real life world. Now, Cow's theorem: by establishing rights to use resources, governments can internalize externalities when transaction costs or bargaining costs are zero. Now, in order to understand this concept and the concept of receptors and emitters, let us consider an example. The example is about a rancher who produces, who breeds cattle at his ranch, and then there is a farmer. The two of them are living in neighboring areas. There is no boundary wall inside it. This is a hypothetical example to explain the concept how government property rights can cause a difference in the benefits gained by the two individuals. Now, the wheat farmer is actually harvesting wheat over there, right next to the cattle farmer who is breeding cattle for beef. Now, the two first, let's consider the graph on the panel A, which is beef output per year is on the x-axis, and price of beef in dollars is represented on y-axis. Now, consider the two markets in case of wheat and in case of beef as perfectly competitive markets. Now, in this case, the first marginal private cost curve of beef intersects price of beef, which is the demand curve, and marginal revenue curve also intersects that curve at point where the output is decided as QB1. Now, this is very important that you consider this, that price and the demand curve are same in case of perfect competition, as well as the marginal revenue curve and demand curve are the same. Now, the point of intersection of marginal private cost represented by MPCB intersects the demand curve at the point where the output is determined as QB1. Now, there is a scenario in between the two wheat and beef, in fact wheat farmer and the rancher. The scenario is that since there is no boundary wall in between, the rancher's cattle often walk into the wheat farmer's crop, and the result is damage to the crop. Now, both of them have their own rights. For example, the wheat farmer has the right of cattle-free land because he is harvesting crop, and the cattle farmer or the rancher has the right to, for example, open area for its cattle. Now, it all depends on whose right is established by the government. Since it all depends on whose property right is established by the government, now let us consider that the government establishes the property right of the wheat farmer and allows him to have access to cattle-free land. Now, in that case, any damage to the crop of wheat farmer is a negative externality of cattle rancher. Now, in this case, the scenario would be that marginal private cost needs to be added with marginal external cost, and only then it would be equivalent to the marginal social cost, which is the second curve to the left of marginal private cost. Now, this marginal external cost is equal to the damage to the output of wheat farmer multiplied by the price. So, as the price of the wheat would increase, the damage, the marginal external cost would also increase. So, in this case, the new equilibrium point of output would be equal to Q star B, which is again the intersection of demand curve and this second marginal cost curve, considering of marginal private cost plus marginal external cost equal to which is either marginal social cost. Now, in this case, the government's property rights has automatically internalized government's establishment of property rights has automatically internalized the total internalized the externality, negative externality, and this has caused the shift of marginal cost curve to the left when marginal economic cost is included inside it. Do remember that in this case the government has established the property right of cattle-free land for the wheat farmer. Now, in this scenario, the rancher has certain decisions to take. For example, as long as the output being produced, Q star B, is efficient is optimal in terms of revenue for his survival, he would stay in business. And if that output, if the revenue generated and the total cost incurred exceeds, the total cost actually exceeds the total revenue generated, then he would go out of business and let that land go and move someplace else. Now, further, there is an option. Maybe he would, evaluating his cost, he would consider like erecting a fence in between the two areas, the two lands, which would be again his cost, but it would not come into his marginal cost, and he could produce the quantity QB1 again. Then there is another option, that maybe if he can convince the wheat farmer for purchasing that land, he would purchase wheat farmer's lands and open his land for the cattle. Now, this shows that just by establishing the property rights by the government, and there is an efficient allocation, and the quantity which was being produced in excess by the rancher is reduced to QB star. And then that validates the Cow's theorem. The point is, it also highlighted the aspect that government's establishment of property rights, in fact, whoever first gets the property rights also changes the situation. It does not affect the efficiency, because the result would be same, but it would affect the two parties, that one party would be benefited and other would not. Now, let us assume the second case, in which the government establishes the right of ranch farmer for open area of land. Now, in that case, the wheat farmer, its output would be, for example, at now going towards the B panel of the case, output would be MCQW1. Now, in order to increase its output, it would need to pay the ranch farmer to reduce its output. It would have to strike a deal between these two. In this case, they would negotiate, and the wheat farmer would need to convince the rancher that you need to reduce your output or the production of cattle not on QB1 but reduce it to Q star B, and in that case the cattle won't overrun his wheat crop. And to pay that amount every time, the wheat farmer needs to increase its output from MCW to MC star W, or the output from QW1 to Q star W. So its marginal cost would shift rightwards, and it can produce more quantity. Again, highlighting the same aspect, that just by establishing the property right, the government can benefit one of the individuals, and despite the fact that the total efficiency would be at the same level, the quantity of beef would be reduced in either the case, whether the ranch farmer receives the property right, or the rancher receives the property right, or wheat farmer receives the property right. In both the cases, the quantity of wheat being produced, quantity of cattle being produced would reduce from QB1 to Q star B. Now, there are limitations, of course, to Cow's theorem. Number one is transaction costs are not zero in many situations, because when two parties are making deals among each other, they would need to maybe because of some documentation or because of the time that it takes to strike the deal, it would bear some transaction costs which are not always zero. And the main point is, however you allocate the property right, the distribution of income is affected, which we also saw in the previous example. that whether the government established the property right for the rancher or for the wheat farmer, whoever gets the first property right is benefited, and because they have a very productive resource in their access on which they can bargain. In the previous case, the resource was, for example, for farmer was the land, cattle-free land, and resource for rancher was free area for breeding its cattle. Now, we can consider another example in which you allocate the allocation of the property right affects the distribution of income. For example, plight of American farmer is a case in which because of excessive use of pesticides and technologically advanced seeds and fertilizers and pesticides, the farmers pollute the area, and plus there are other waste involved from cattle ranching. Now the point is that usually what in rural areas what farmers would do is that the rain would come in and clean that area away. Now with excessive use of pesticides and chemicals and different technologies, that might pollute the environment. But that is fine as long as the farmer is operating in the urban area and he himself bears the cost in terms of the environment. But the situation completely changes when we consider the aspect that maybe certain housing amenities start to establish in that rural area, and people are starting to move out of the congested urban cities towards peaceful rural areas where the accommodation is cheaper. Now, in this case, the pollution caused and the smell and the odor because of that foul smell out of cattle waste is spread in the area, the residents might object to that. Now the question is, who would be getting the property rights, or whose property rights would be established by the government? Now this is a dilemma because it would cause the changes in the distribution of income. Now let's assume, for example, that government establishes the property rights of the individuals or the settlers who are settling in the urban area. Now in that case, the farmer would have to pay for the pollution that he is generating. Now, as long as that pollution is being generating, the farmer has to pay the number of residents living over there, and he has to bear the cost for that. And with increase in the number of residents and increase in the foul smell and increase in pollution, he would have to pay more, and this might result into farmer going out of the business. And secondly, the issue is that farmer can also object in that case, because he would be using that method of waste disposal, the runoff, the rain method, to for a very long time, and the housing amenities and the houses were built very later on, so he does not have any other method of establishment to other method established to eradicate the waste. Now, with this established, the American farmer, if he is given the right, then the situation is different. But on the other hand, if we assume that the right, the establishment of property right is first given to the home builders over there, then in that case, they would be charging the farmer again and again. But on the other hand, if the farmer is given the right to his freedom to pollute that area, in that case the situation would be different, because all the homeowners would need to bear the cost of that pollution, and that would be a very lengthy process. Now in this example, however, it is again clear that assignment of property right by the government either to the farmer or to the homeowners causes a distribution of income dilemma and changes in the income distribution of the overall system. Now let us consider another example, the problem of urban flooding. Now with more urbanization and more land development, with construction of roads and concrete based buildings in American cities, in many American cities there is a problem of flooding whenever there is rain, because the sewerage system is filled with water and the water comes out to the streets. Now with so much concrete and so much roads, there is no space for the water to seep into the land. Now this is again a dilemma, because there are, if we identify the involved parties, there would be basically the developers of the land and the already living residents over there who do not want any further development to take place. Now this excessive development would be causing more flooding, while if the demand for no more development would hinder the economic growth. So there is a dilemma over there, and if as per Cow's theorem, if we if the government allocates the right or identifies the right of one party, then the other party would have to compensate the first party. Now let us assume that in case like there are so many old residents in the area and there is one developer, then those residents can, for example, charge demand different compensations for them, and they need to be organized for that. So if they are not organized, the matter would still be disputed. On the other hand, if there are so many developers and there are so many homeowners, then developers can also manipulate the situation by either threats or bribes or extra payments. And the situation is still very controversial, because there would be homeowners, old homeowners, who do not want to be a part of this, and they just want a free ride and without having to pay for it to the developers. So the situation would be very controversial unless both parties are organized and negotiate. Secondly, the terms of the contract and negotiation would be costly in the existence of transaction costs. So there would again be an involvement of the government in this case to resolve the matter and to, for example, charge a penalty or a tax on developers for taxing the additional land. But the point is that the additional land tax is still not is a very difficult thing to measure, because of the amount of flooding caused by additional development is very debatable. Now, in terms of original application of Cow's theorem, the Clean Air Act of 1990s allowed for the sale of right to pollute. Firms face a trade-off when they pollute. If they pollute, they forego the right to sell the emission permit to others. Now, the point was, in the Clean Air Act, the government announced certain permits for the firms, which the firms had to purchase from the, we will discuss that in detail later, had to purchase. Now if that permit could also be sold in the open market to other firms. Now if a firm had a trade-off when they in terms of pollution, if they pollute, they forego the right to sell the emission permit to others, and if they do not pollute, they have to sell that emission right to others. They might benefit from that. So with this scenario, this was Clean Air Act was associated with excess carbon emission due to coal as a source of energy, and in order to control that carbon emission, there were like emission permits issued by the firm, and these permits was also traded in the market, and we would discuss that again coming in the next slides. Now with electricity, this has motivated firms to shift to natural gas and away from coal, coal as means of producing electricity. Now, in order to reduce the carbon emission, firms had an incentive because carbon emission was taxed, or there was a certain quantity of emission they could, or certain amount of pollution they could release in the environment. So what they did was that they in order to reduce that level of pollution, they shifted from coal to the natural gas. Now, if there are no pollution rights available, then a firm would emitting waste would be emitting at 100,000 tons of annual emissions. Now, in this case, there would be no marginal social cost to stop them, and they would pollute as much as marginal social benefit is equal to 0, and that would be the total output of 100,000. Now let us assume that there is a supply of pollution rights, and not every firm can release emissions in the environment. The government has specific rights, and those rights are issued on certain payment, and only firms with those rights can release emissions in the market. Now, in this case, the marginal social benefit and cost would be defined by the supply of pollution rights. Now, if the government targets to supply the pollution rights to 75,000, for example, in this case, then the price and marginal social benefit would be $20. Now, what would be the efficient amount of pollution abatement? Now, the pollution abatement would mean reducing the level of pollution being released in the environment. Now, there is a marginal social benefit of reducing the level of pollution in the environment, and that level marginal social benefit is a downward sloping curve representing that the benefit reduces with the amount of pollution being reduced. Similarly, there is a marginal social cost of reducing that pollution, and that marginal social cost increases with more amount of pollution being reduced. Now, considering this scenario, when marginal social cost is increasing and marginal social benefit is decreasing, there would be a point of equilibrium in which would is represented by point E in the graph, the efficient amount of pollution abatement. Now, the point is that we need to consider the opportunity cost of eliminating pollution, because there is a cost of reducing the pollution, and then that results in increase in prices, and that might result in an increased burden on the consumer. So if the government needs to consider the cost of reducing the level of pollution, or reducing the level of emissions, or pollution abatement, and then it also needs to consider the benefit from it as well. So if costs exceed the benefit, then it would be the example, it can be said that it would be like the cure is more expensive than the disease. Now, instead of using market forces to cause firms to internalize externalities, we can use emission standards and apply these to all. Market forces scenario was given just a few slides before, when we discussed that government can give pollution emission permits. Under pollution emission permits, firms are given rights to emit certain levels of pollution, and only those firms who have those permits can emit carbon, for example, carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide in the environment. There are different sort of permits that can be used. On the other hand, certain regulatory standards which can also be used to eliminate the externality. Now, let us in this case consider the regulating emissions, regulating the emissions, the level of emissions that a firm can do, losses in efficiency from differences in the marginal social benefit of emissions. Now, these standards might result into loss of efficiency if they are not specifically tuned for the different types of firms. For example, there are two types of firms. Both of them are producing carbon emissions as per their marginal social benefit, which is QA1 for firm A. Now let us only consider first the firm A case. We already discussed in previous slides that government can put up a cost on that through a permit or through some means, so that a specific fee for that emission can be charged, which was $20 in the previous case. Now in this case, on the y-axis there are tons of emissions per year, and on the x-axis is cost and benefit in terms of dollars. Now first we consider only the case of firm A. Now if firm A is for example emitting up to QA1, then if a price is charged for example, there is a marginal social cost which is equal to marginal external cost, a charge of $10 is applied to unanimously across the firms, then the efficient amount would reduce to QA star. The total amount of emissions by firm A would be reduced from QA1 to QA star. And now let us consider the case of firm B. Now in case of firm B, before that any charge applied by the government, the marginal social benefit of the total in terms of tons of emission per year were QB1 represented in the lower panel of this slide. Now when the charge is applied, which is equivalent to $10, they move from this point to QB star, which is represented by point F. Now let us consider this. First was this scenario where there is a market mechanism through which carbon emission was being considered. Just like previous example, we have charged a price of $10 for carbon emissions, and that has resulted into reduction of pollution emissions in the environment. In case of firm A, the total emission has been reduced from QA1 to QA star, represented by point C, which is the intersection of marginal social benefit and marginal social cost. And do remember that this $10 has been decided as marginal social cost when they are equal to marginal marginal external cost, when the amount charged is exactly equal to marginal external cost. In this case, the tons of emission per year have reduced for firm A from QA1 to QA star, and for firm B from QB1 to QB star. Now let us assume that government tries to regulate the emissions and apply a uniform standard, that okay, all the firms can produce emissions up to QR. Now this has been represented by a straight line going through both of firm A and firm B graphs. Now on the top graph, the firm A which was reduced its efficient level of emission from QA1 to QA star, which was now efficient, would have to reduce its emissions to QR. And secondly, and then there is there are losses in terms of efficiency represented by the area A, B and C shaded area, which is a rectangle. Now in case of firm B, when that uniform standard QR is applied, which is represented by a straight line going up to x-axis, previously the firm had moved to QB star, but then it would have to move to QR. Now in this case, the inefficiency in the emissions would be represented by F, G and H. Now applying uniform standards across the firms which have differing marginal social benefit curves would cause inefficiency in the system. The whole point of discussing this stricter regulation by the government, by controlling the total amount of emissions, by passing a unanimous policy despite without considering the type of the industry or the preferences of the industry or the type of the firm or preferences of the firm, would result into inefficiency in terms of emissions. Now we can also consider a similar example, considering different locations. When marginal external costs differ across locations, because the amount of marginal social cost should be equal to marginal economic cost. Now marginal economic cost for firm C and for firm D is different. For firm C, marginal economic cost is $20, and we are assuming that firm C is operating in the rural area, urban area, and on the other hand firm D is operating in the rural area. While operating in the rural area, because the surroundings are not very much populated, so for that pollution it is causing, the marginal external cost is only $5, which might be missing in the slide over here, but it is still I would say this line horizontal parallel to x-axis represents that $5. Now let us assume this scenario, that with the firm again was firm C was producing at the point where marginal social benefit just intersects the x-axis, where marginal social benefit is equal to 0. But when the price of $20 is charged to it for its emissions, then its total output reduces to Q star C. This Q star C represents the efficiency in in emissions. Now on the other hand, in case of firm D, when it is producing at the point of intersection of marginal social benefit at x-axis, and the tax of or the payment of $5 or the fee of $5 results into reduction in the cost of tons of emissions per year from that point of intersection to Q star D, which is represented by intersection of marginal social benefit and marginal economic cost at point T. But then again, the government regulation of a uniform standard applicable to all the firms, despite the differing locations and despite the differing marginal economic cost, the result would be inefficiency in the system. Now that inefficiency in case of firm C is represented by XYZ, where firm C was producing less than QR, while on the other hand this inefficiency is represented by triangle shaded area RST, in which case the firm D was producing more than the regulated area. Now QD star and QC star represents the efficient areas, because at these points marginal social benefits were equal to marginal social cost, but this regulated amount of carbon emissions by the government resulted into less than efficient points. In order to consider the theory and practice in USA, Environmental Production Agency regulates the environment and controls the pollution and emissions and carbon emission and carbon monoxide emissions and sulfur emissions. As we said that we would discuss this topic in detail again about the tradable permits. We are coming to that. So now by command and control policies like this, just the one we have discussed in previous graphs, which causes inefficiencies, like ordering a firm to regulate the emissions, that okay, you have to reduce, all of the firms would have to reduce the emissions to this level. That would for example cause an administrative burden, and that would also cause that would also discourage innovation by the firms, because market oriented incentives to the firm gives them further benefits in terms of pollution permits also. They can trade those, and we would discuss that again later on, and I would explain what sort of market practices are available. So such type of control practices, number one, there would always be firms who would expect that it is difficult for the government to monitor their emissions regularly, so they would hide certain emissions and not portray actual statistics, and that would again produce inefficiency in the system. And secondly, it would be again a very big administrative cost on the government to monitor so many industries across the country, and that also would discourage innovations, because any such regulated orders by the government and command and control policy by the government would hinder the innovative capability of the industries, where they try to find better methods. If methods are given market incentives, they would try to find better methods to reduce emissions in the environment. Then Clean Air Act of 1990 was announced, and in 1990s it was tradable on the Chicago Board of Exchange. Now these tradable emission permits were called allowances. Now these allowances were actually they had markets for pollution rights. So any industry which wanted to use that right would purchase that from EPA, would actually announce those every some time, and they would buy that from Environment Protection Agency and from the tradable Chicago Board of Exchange. So if an industry felt that its requirement for emitting pollution in the environment is greater than the standard, it would purchase those permits, and in case they do not need to emit pollution in the environment, they would sell those permits on tradable Chicago Board of Exchange. Now this was actually based on carbon content of the pollution that was being emitted in the environment. So considering the cost, because people expected in those times that the cost of that tradable pollution right, or transferable emission permit, which was also called an allowance, would be around $200 to $300 per unit of production. But in that case, the firms, because that was a market incentive, so firms started to innovate, and what they did was they tried to purchase the coal from those sources which was less in terms of carbon emission. And secondly, they also installed scrubbers. The scrubbers are like some sort of machinery and equipment which would reduce the carbon content out of the pollutant that is being emitted in the environment. Now this option of pollution rights to firms gave them an incentive in terms of allowances which could be tradable in the market, and was useful since the cost of scrubber approximately was 125, the capital cost was $125 million, and on the other hand, the marginal cost was around $65 to $75 million, while the permit was being traded in 1995 to 96 at $100 in the Chicago Board of Exchange. Now the main aim was, in this way, the producers could reduce their total cost by installing scrubbers, and which actually gave them a benefit, and in terms they could actually add the cost of not emitting, like the cost of being those tradable permits as their profits, because whenever the producers had excess permits, they could use them in the trade and earn income for that. Now, similar market policies, there is a list of such market policies which has been very useful, specifically in the US and other developed countries, because the policy that we just discussed is called cap and trade policy. Cap and trade would mean to cap the emission or to control it at a given level, and also to trade the permits in the market. So the benefit was a market oriented, both for the producers of and users of sulfur dioxide or carbon monoxide emissions and the pollutants, and then for the government also, which and based on these cap and trade policies, the emissions were reduced to a greater extent and have been controlled. Now, emission offset policy is specifically, for example, by Environment Protection Agency, which is offering to various firms. Certain emission rules and regulations are applied across various states in United States of America. So now, let's assume that in a certain area there is a specific rule in which the emission in the pollution in the environment is already being produced by the firms, and the level is reached by all the existing firms. And if a new firm wants to enter that area, that would mean that it cannot, because its emission would result into excess emission than the standard defined by that state or that regulation. Now, the issue is that such rigid regulations might hinder economic growth, because investments by the firms cause increase in output, as well as more employment opportunity, as well as economic growth. So such rigid policies might result into very dire consequences later on. So then emission offset policy would be that if, for example, one firm needs to enter an area where the standard is already fulfilled and there are already other polluting firms producing that level of pollution which is met by the standard, what this new firm can do, if it can convince the pollutants that, let's assume that this firm wants to pollute the environment, it needs to pollute the environment worth of, for example, 500 tons per year. Now, if it wants to pollute the environment by 500 tons per year, it needs to convince the other pollutants to reduce their total pollution to a level so that when it enters or the area, its pollution would actually bring it back to the standard. Now, it would mostly have to pay the other pollutants to reduce their level of pollution, and if it can get a unanimous agreement on that, it can enter that area and get permission from Environmental Protection Agency. Another very interesting scheme is bubble scheme. The bubble scheme is basically it is like placing a glass bowl over a firm and calculating or considering its total level of pollution by as a total of different types. For example, if a firm needs to release some sort of pollutant in a greater amount in the environment, then it can reduce the other type of pollutant in the environment and maintain its total cap or its total quantity that comes under the bubble scheme. Now, there is also an option of banking of emission reduction, that, for example, that is about those emission reduction emission permits. In this case, the firms, what they could do is that if they, for example, have a permit, for example, 1,000 or 1,000,000 tons per year, and in this year they produce, for example, 900,000, that 100,000 excess amount would be banked, in a sense that firm can use that later on in next year when it increases, when it goes above the target of 1,000,000 pounds, and it won't be charged any fine for that. Or if that firm is convinced that its production technology has improved and it has actually reduced the level of pollution permanently, then it can sell that to the other firms. All these market benefits, all like cap and trade policy, emission offset policy, bubble scheme, banking of emission reductions, and the one we discussed under the cap and trade policies by tradable, marketable permits. All these gives incentives to the firm, to business entities for reduction of pollution. The whole debate of this under public finance is that when we started with this pollution externality, we started to tax negative externality and subsidize the positive externality, and brought them back to the pollution emission was brought back to the level of efficiency. But then there have been cases in developed countries where they have used alternative measures like this one, where the government does not have to tax or intervene in the market and let the market system, after defining certain regulations, it let the market system reduce the pollution level itself. Now, one negative aspect of this is that the tax revenue, that the taxation results into a substantial amount of revenue for the government in the name of, for example, pollution tax. But that revenue is foregone as an added advantage of not monitoring the firms that extensively, or giving them market opportunities to reduce the actual level of pollution themselves and reduce the global warming or reduce the greenhouse effect. Now, there are certain general global externalities like deforestation, global warming, and CFCs. During the current lecture, we have discussed the chaos theorem, which says that externalities that are being created, first we identified the causes of those externalities. We identified that the lack of property rights, or when property rights are not identified for certain individuals, like for clean air, for clean stream of water, clean lakes, healthier environment, which do have costs to the individual if they are polluted. When these are not property rights are not identified by the government or by any authoritarian body, the externalities emerge, and these externalities can be negative or positive externalities, but we were specifically discussing about the negative externalities, and such externalities can be either taxed by the government if they are negative externalities to bring the level of production to the efficient quantity, or the government can also announce the property right and define the parties and allocate the property right to one of the parties, and they would negotiate and come to a market-based solution. But the whole point of this is that allocation of property right at the initial stage would, this is the most important part that we discussed, that the allocation of the property right at the initial stage would result into redistribution of income, because the recipient of the property right would attain a right to a resource, a very productive resource, like maybe to clean air, to the stream of water. So if it is a firm, it can easily pollute that stream of water, and if it is a business, it is an individual economic agent or a citizen who only wants the right to clean stream for his excursion use, so or drinking purposes, he can also exploit the business entities. So giving the right to property right to any one of the individuals would any business entity or in any of the two parties, among any of the two parties, would result in income redistribution among the two parties. Then we discussed that when governments intervene in the market to correct the externalities, to correct, for example, pollution, if they create rigid standards instead of a certain fine or a tax for a certain amount, if they create rigid standards in terms of the quantity, then they create inefficiency in the market, and that inefficiency might be because of the geographical location of the two firms and their differing marginal external cost, or due to their different marginal social benefits in terms of tons of emission. Then we further discussed that there are certain marketable options which have been applied by US government under Environmental Protection Agency. If Environmental Protection Agency is too rigid in its decisions, in its regulation, like command and control sort of environment, that would result into excess administrative costs on them, and that would result into lack of innovation by the industries. On the other hand, certain marketable options are available, in which, for example, there are tradable permits which firms intend to use if they want to pollute, and which firms would sell out in the market if they do not intend to use them. There are other marketable options also available, and by the way, the tradable permits to pollute have caused quite a substantial amount of reduction in most of the developed countries. They have been applied in Europe, and they have been applied in USA, and they are termed as cap and trade policies. Cap and trade, in a sense that you put a cap on the level of emission and you do not let it emit anymore, and then that permit is traded, and there it is an additional benefit to the industries. Then we discuss other options for theory in practice, other options for marketable options, which is like emission offset policy, in which case a firm, when it wants to enter a certain area where the emission standards had already been met for, that firm can convince the other pollutants to reduce the level of carbon emission or emission in the environment, and then it can take part in the that polluting activity over there. Then there is a bubble scheme, in which a bubble or a sort of a glass bowl is placed over an industry, and its total emission is calculated, and it can either increase or decrease certain amount of pollution, like for example carbon for carbon monoxide, for carbon sulfur dioxide, so that it can produce whatever amount it wants and reduce one of the emissions to increase the other emissions. And then there is banking of emission reduction, like that would mean that you would be given permits for pollution emission, or the firm would be given permits for pollution emission, and the amount that they do not emit during a current year, they can save it for future emissions, and if they do not want to save it for themselves, they can sell it in the market. Now, all of this discussion related to pollution in the environment, plus from the public policy perspective, plus the government intervention in the market, has resulted into a bigger debate in the economy, in the globe as a whole. So such type of debate that we have taken along this lecture has highlighted a very important aspect of public finance and government intervention. In the last lecture we discussed that government intervention might result into distortions or failures in the market, but in this case we have discussed that the government intervention can cause efficiency in the market as well, and it is very important to understand the role of government in terms of public policy, in terms of taxation, in terms of subsidies, in terms of providing the property rights to its citizens for a pollution-free environment, for sustainable development. Okay, hope to see you in the next lecture. Take care. See you.